Would you rather wake up cis tomorrow or never be able to transition?
Ooh. Oh my God, that's I really enjoy being part of the LGBTQI plus community. And as much as like cis heteronormative people have that privilege, I feel like I was placed on this earth during this time to be an advocate and activist for the people. I feel it in my spirit, just that I'm a warrior. As somebody who also is an Aries, a leader according to astrology. um I'm very spiritual, so I follow a lot of different things. Um I wouldn't want to give up that privilege of being a trans woman, and then a Latina trans woman, being a brown trans woman, and being a voice. Because I've always said, the privilege I have is being able to walk outside my door every day and kind of and pretty much traverse society and not get, clocked. And because of that privilege, I wanted to step forward and represent the transgender community, especially trans women, have a voice for those that feel they can't say anything, or they're not allowed to be in certain spaces. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to do this for us. It's part of the fight. So I would want to remain my authentic me, who I am,
Mm.
who I've become to this day.
Period. Like, we can end the podcast now.
Exactly. That was it. That was great. Welcome to Two Guys Unfiltered, a podcast where we let LGBTQ people like you share their story, the funny ones, the hard ones, and everything in between. I'm Juju.
And I'm August, so whether you're part of the community or just here to listen, we're glad you're here. Our guest today is Kitana. She shared her transition story and current activism in Corpus Christi, Texas. So, since this episode is all about activism and supporting the trans community, we would like you guys to comment some of the resources that you guys are aware of in the area around you. So if you would put in the comments some organizations that you know of and what city they're in case someone watching is in need. Now let's get into it. Alrighty. So Kitana, can you give us a little introduction of who you are?
Sure. My name is Kitana Idenia Sanchez. Pronouns are she, her, ella. I am a 39-year-old Latina trans woman, currently residing in Corpus Christi, Texas. I'm originally from Del Rio, Texas. I moved to Corpus to continue my education. I graduated from Texas A&M Corpus Christi and with a bachelor's in English, and pretty much decided to stay in Corpus after I graduated. Um, I I wear a lot of different hats within the community. Vice President of Corpus Christi LGBT, co-facilitator for the Coastal Bend Trans Alliance. I'm on the Pride. I'm on the board for Pride Corpus Christi. Um, I, I do a lot of. Oh, I facilitate shows within Corpus Christi. Entertainment shows like Brittany Andrews Entertainment, Bay Entertainment. I'm their facilitator. I also am an entertainer within Corpus Christi. Currently, I have the title of Miss Trans Texas, USA, and that pageant is supposed to happen from what I've been told, but I know there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. But for now, I always consider myself Miss Trans Texas because I have not given up the title yet. So,
Hey.
so, uh, and I do a lot of just different stuff within the queer community here, just trying to help, especially like the transgender community. Um, I decided to become an advocate for the trans community when I was in college. It was pretty much, I think I want to say it was either like my junior years when I got involved with the Gay Straight Alliance that was there on campus, and that's what it was called at the time.
Mhm.
Um, And I noticed that there was like hardly any representation of transgender people. And I just kind of was like, that's when like I said, I was like I already knew who I was, but I hadn't arrived at the place I wanted to be at, but I knew like I had to speak out. And so I was part of that. I was part of that group. And from that, after I graduated, that's how I found Corpus Christi LGBT. The president, Liz Robledo, reached out to me online and had said, "Hey, I've seen you active within the community, trying to have awareness and raise voices about awareness and representation for the transgender community, and we need you on our board." And I was like, yeah, like, let me see what you're about. Went to a couple of meetings, got the feel for it. It started off very small. Corpus Christi LGBT, CCLGBT was very small at the time. Uh, Not a lot of representation, but eventually we got the right people in. And from that, we formed into, this group that helps the community as well. And then with that, that's how I was able to also advocate more for the trans community. We had, that's how I was able to get involved and help to pretty much begin Coastal Bend Trans Alliance. And the Coastal Bend Trans Alliance was started because of a mother within Corpus Christi, Belinda Trevino Cantu, who was looking for resources for her child, Mason at the time, who was transitioning. And he wanted like a space with other trans individuals. And I think he was in high school at the time. So she was like, "My son, we don't know what to do. Like, I see what you're doing within this was back in like 2015. And so I got together with her, discussed it. And I know she wanted like a space for adults who have, trans kids. And I said, why don't we like consider having a group where it's inclusive of like not just parents and kids, but like everybody, like trans people, older trans people, um, family members of trans people that can come in and kind of just relate to one another and have like almost like a support group or, peer support group." And after that little kind of like meeting and discussion, she started the hashtag Be Human campaign. And through that, the next year we had a Be Human concert. And we were able to, with that concert, we were able to raise enough money to start start a support group at the Coastal Bend, Coastal Bend Wellness Foundation. And that was kind of like their first like trans support group in that environment. And we came up with the name Coastal Bend Trans Alliance amongst each other because we really didn't have a name for it. And that's when I was able to also reach out to somebody within the community who had been around for a while. And I always, like I said, I always like credit this individual because she's the one that kind of like helped me through my transition as well. And Brittany Andrews, her stage name, I brought her on board because I was like, I want you to also have your input from somebody who's been in transition already for years and get your experience. So through that, we helped facilitate this trans support group. And then with that, we had those parents come in. And thanks to the parents that kept hounding like the Wellness Foundation about resources, they brought, HRT to the Coastal Bend. So it was all, a group effort to help the trans community. So it was a great experience. And yeah, after that, like I said, I just kept entertaining. I kept competing in pageantry. I love pageantry. I'm taking a break right now, other than like Miss Trans Texas, but like I said, waiting on kind of like the pageant system itself. But I love the competition. I love also too when I compete with like other trans women. I see it as a sisterhood, as a time to like bond and get to know each other. Because I had that experience at the university with a group of girls that I used to dance with. We had a Middle Eastern dance club, and we did a lot of Arabic belly dancing routines. And that's when I understood like how sisterhood worked. And they even accepted me, pre-transition and after. So when I found pageantry, I was like, oh, this is like a sisterhood again. It can be catty sometimes, I'll
Mm.
admit. There's some drama that happens behind the scenes, but for the most part, everybody's there supporting one another. Um, but I think that's pretty much a little bit about me and what I do, who I am. Like I said, I really, really love the stage. I really love to entertain because for me, it's another form of artistry, and I'm able to express certain things on stage that maybe I can't like say or like I feel like, oh, I can't say this, in public or whatever, but you know what, on stage I can say this because I'm acting this out. I'm giving this emotion, and I try to make a statement sometimes within like my performances, especially if they're like, oh, well, it's going to be this kind of theme or something. I'm like, well, how can I incorporate the advocacy of like trans individuals into this? I think one of my performances I did at House of Rock one year was when I think it was it was like the first time that Trump was being elected into office. And I had like a monologue in the beginning of my performance about him when he was talking like on TV about, pretty much like saying he can do whatever he wants and he can grab, individuals, genitals, whatnot. So I used that little soundbite and then went into a song. I don't remember. I'm so bad with like names and stuff, titles of songs, but it's like, should I wear my hair in a ponytail? Should I dress myself self up in Chanel? Uh, do I pleasure me by what you seek? It's called Absolutely Not. And it's just kind of like a woman empowerment song. And I remember too, um, I had like a picture of him and like the theme was like back to the Stone Ages because that's how the producer felt like the times we were being sent back into the Stone Ages. So I remember I was dressed as like a cave woman type situation, like the whole like leopard print, whatnot. And I had like a club. And I remember I got the picture and like threw it on the ground and like started beating the crap out of it, like making a statement like, no. And I was able to perform the same performance later in the evening at the Hidden Door, the longest running gay bar in Corpus. And that's when I did like I had a Sinead O'Connor moment, and like I ripped the picture in half. Like when she ripped the picture of the Pope, I ripped his picture, like threw it everywhere. And like some people live for it, and there were some conservatives in the crowd, surprisingly, at the bar, and they were kind of like, and I'm like, well, this is art, so. But
Yeah,
that's
take it
that's
how
why
you want.
yeah, that's why I really love entertaining. Like I said, I think you're able
Yeah,
to express yourself and express a message that you may have.
For sure.
yeah.
So yeah, a little bit about me and yeah, what I like to do.
So, if you wanna give us a, summary of your coming out story, like, when did you come out?
So coming out for me, like I said, I was attending Texas A&M Corpus Christi and really trying to traverse where I was and meeting another individual who now transitioned to male. They introduced me to like the nightclub scene, and I had never been to a gay bar. And at the time, it was Club 6 downtown. And he was like, I want to take you to see what it's like, this and that. And mind you, we were both like pre-transition. So this is my first time being exposed to, the queer culture and what it's
Mhm.
about. And it's a 2-story club. Um, Not necessarily that it had like 2 dance floors, but the bottom area was like stage, top area was like you could see the stage. And that's when I saw for the first time, drag entertainers and showgirls. And I always say this too, that the one entertainer from here that I saw that just inspired me to be like, I want to do this was Anastasia Davis. And she did like this beautiful number, or she did this number that she came out in like a beautiful dress and then did kind of like a burlesque thing where like she unzipped it from the back, came out and like was in pasties. And I was like, oh my God, you can do that. You can be like, oh my gosh. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, I want to start performing, but I didn't know where to go. And like I said, I was at the university dancing with my girls at the time with the Middle Eastern Dance Club, and I started wanting to get on stage, compete, and that's when I did my first pageant, Miss Sweetheart, at that bar. And I had help from my girls, and Brittany Andrews is the promoter for that. And I really didn't know her too well, but I just knew she was the promoter. And I remember seeing her, and just this, beautiful, gorgeous, redheaded, green-eyed, buxom beauty that's just like, oh my gosh, like, who is she? Like, was very intimidated by her. But later on, after discussing with her for another pageant I competed in, she was like, you can live as, who you are. And I'm like, what do you mean? She told me, she's like, look, I come from a small town. I know what it's like, and I'm living my life right now as me. And I'm like, oh, okay. So she, showed me the ways, and was like mentoring me and being like, you have to do this, and like, you have to make sure your documents are in order. So it was through that I really learned that I could be myself. And and coming out was not, I think a lot of people already knew, so it wasn't like a shocking surprise to many people. It was shocking to, I think, my family, my mother and father. More so, I think my mother. I grew up in a Catholic home, so church every Saturday or Sunday, catechism, went through all the sacraments. And I remember when I told them, this is who I've always been, and this is what I'm doing. I actually gave my parents an ultimatum at the time. I said, you can either love me for who I am and accept me for all, that I am. I said, or if you decide to cut me off, do it now. And let's just rip the Band-Aid off. And the reason I did that was because I had read so many stories of other like trans individuals and queer individuals whose, family just totally cut them out and pushed them to the wayside and didn't want anything to do with them. And I let my parents know, I said, if you don't want anything to do with me, I have chosen family back in Corpus. I said, so I know I can get through this. And that was kind of like the first time, I want to say, like, I rebelled against my parents, because growing up I was the wallflower, never really spoke out. I kind of just sat in the background and just kind of, very introverted, and kind of absorbed everything. And when I had said that, my dad, at the time, he was like, you know what? Like, I love you regardless. You are my child, and I don't want to push you away from me. Um, So, and in that aspect too, a lot of people are like, oh wow, because my dad was very machismo. Not machismo, but like he had that, he was a Vietnam veteran, he was a man's man, he did a lot of, stuff that you wouldn't think that he might, and then being Latino, you would think he might like not want to have a part of that. So when he accepted me fully, it was like, oh wow, that's totally different. My mother, it took her a while to come around. I think because she was a nurse, she saw the psychology behind it, and she had a lot of knowledge of like trans people, because I had a conversation with her one time that she had seen trans people when she was going to nursing school, but they were in like mental institutions. So, it was different. It was like the 80s, 90s. So trans wasn't really out like it is now. It wasn't really fully like accepted. If you were trans, it's like, hey, you know what? Here's a check. Just, stay at home and kind of just like be your, don't be out in society. So for her, I see where she was coming, with that. And she had a lot of like other questions too, because I think she felt that maybe I was like abused. And I told her, I was like, no, like, this is just who I am. And I let her know, it's like, not everybody who comes out, in the community has been like, has been through that kind of situation. My parents from the beginning were like, hey, if anything happens, let us know. And I told her, I was like, this would have, I would have let y'all know if something happened to me, but that was not the cause. And I'm not saying that. And I told her too, I said, remember, that's not also why people come out as, LGBT. So, and then of course, her being Catholic had a lot of influence because in her mind, she's like, where did I go wrong? I didn't raise, this, but I told her, look, this is just who I am. So it took her a minute and now we have a better relationship. And having my father, he passed away in November recently. So, my mother and I have been bonding a lot more. And I can say that I've had to learn, pretty much had to learn like parent child dynamic because growing up, being like associated as male in my family, it was different. My mother was very like proud of everything I did. And then once I transitioned to being a woman, she wasn't the only woman in the house anymore. So,
Oh.
it was kind of now I'm learning that mother daughter dynamic, which I asked like a lot of like my cis friends, my cis female friends. I'm like, is this how you are with your mother? Is this something that like mother daughter do? And they're like, yes, there's commonalities with that. Like, just you have to work through it. I'm like, okay. I'm just making sure. I'm like, because pre-transition, I'm like, it wasn't an issue. And I'm like, certain things are now like, oh, you're not doing this or why? And I'm like, okay, like we never discussed this before, but now but yeah, we have a better relationship with that. And as far as like family members, they were pretty much accepting. I didn't have any of my aunts or uncles really kind of say, I want nothing to do with you. It's, and I think because like success is like the best revenge. I showed them, I was able to, leave Del Rio, come to Corpus, start my life, graduate college, get a job, do the whole 9 to 5 thing and be successful at things. And like I said, like winning pageants, being on boards, I'm successful. So I think for like my family, they're like, hey, she's just living her life. Like she's not. And I also too, I always tell people, I'm like, I never caused any issues growing up with my parents. I even told my parents that when I transitioned, I was like, I never stepped out of your bounds. While under your roof, I never went against the rules. So, if this is like the most heinous crime I've committed, in the family, then so be it. But what have I done? So it, like I said, my mom finally like got it. And yeah, I've had acceptance from my family and they're still very accepted because they'll check in on me from time to time. They're like, hey, how are you doing? Or they'll see like, I have like other family members that follow me on socials and they'll be like, hey, I see you doing this, like keep going. Or, how can we support? And also to like educating them too. Because I think a lot of people within that home in my hometown of Del Rio aren't are barely starting to like understand the whole like trans and queer movement. So, like I said, like also being a trailblazer for that, for my family and being kind of like the first out like trans person, they're becoming aware of like, oh, okay, they're stepping outside of that box when in Del Rio where it's like, no, it's just this. And it's like, actually, no, the world is so much bigger than that. So that's been my experience thus far.
That's awesome to see, like, the progression of your family from, like,
Hmm.
the very beginning of your transition to, like, now that you're 40, like, the whole timeline of it, it just proves that, like, everything gets better with time, you just have to give
Hmm.
your family time.
Yeah.
Um, like, I felt like at the early stages of our transition, we're like, "Why don't you just get it already?" Like, I
Hmm.
get it, so why can't
Yeah.
you? But it's like, just as long as it took us to realize that we were trans, that we wanted to start hormones, like, our family members also need that time to realize and, like,
Yes.
see you for you, even though,
Mhm.
like, for example, like, I came out when I was like 20 or 21. So like I'm now reminding myself like, oh, it took you how many years to realize you're trans? Like how many years is
Mhm.
it gonna be for your parents to realize that you're like, yes, I'm still me, but like just a different version of that.
Exactly. Yeah, and I tell other trans individuals, like, when you come out, please understand that, like, especially, like, your parents, they saw you a certain way for so
Right.
long. And even to this day, my mom still dead names me from time to time, which in the beginning it was very triggering, but I had other trans individuals tell me like it's normal. Don't like get upset because that's how she knew you for so long.
Mhm.
So it still takes and then there's little moments of like misgendering, which I excuse and I'm like, hey, I get it, you know. But I always tell these, other trans individuals that are going through that, it's going to take time. I'm like, so it's kind of like just, it's your family, like it's your parents. They still love you. Like, especially if they accept you, they still love you, but it's going to take them time. So
Mhm.
just, and I tell them too, just show them that you're like doing what you need to do in life and, they'll come around, they'll see everything and they'll be proud.
As
Yeah.
long as there's, like, progression, then, like, that's what makes it worth it. If there's, like, no progression, you're not getting anywhere, then it's
Mhm.
like,
Hmm.
okay, you probably have to cut them off, but, like, as long as they're progressing, then
Yeah.
that's all that matters.
True.
Mhm.
Hmm. True, true, true.
And I know you kinda talked about, like, everything pretty much being, like, a smooth, accepting process, but would you say that there has been, like, a hardest part of your transition? You're like, "Oh, I don't know if I can get through this," or, like, something that stood out that you wish you could give more advice about to people that are in their early stages of transitioning?
Um, I know in like my beginning stages of transition, it was somewhat hard for like my close friends at the time to understand because I even had this attitude of like, oh, I won't transition. Like I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. The egg didn't crack. The egg was like about to crack, but it was like, it's like, no, it's gonna crack. But like admitting like to yourself like this is your authentic self is okay. You can be like, no, this is who I am. And I'm trying to think of like the struggles of because my friends and I always joke around. They're like, your biggest struggle is like, do you want to like size that or not? And I'm just like, oh my god. But I know, at least for me, from my perspective, like one like an issue that has always like been traversing like through society has been like dating, um especially when it's come to like trying to understand like the whole dynamic of like a cis hetero man trying to date a trans woman. And there's been a lot of individuals through my life that I've experienced, have dated, come through, but I've never felt like they actually see me for me. They either like see the fetish behind it or they just like they don't understand it. So, and I always tell like, especially when I'm like trying to get to know somebody, I always tell, especially like the guys, I'm like, look, this is who I am. I'm going to be 40 and at this point in my life, if you can't accept me, then go ahead and kick rocks.
Right.
Like I
You
am
don't have
not,
time to waste.
exactly. I'm not somebody who should be a secret. I'm not somebody who you should come see just at night. I should be celebrated.
Mhm.
I know I tell people I'm like all that I've accomplished. I'm like why wouldn't somebody be proud to have a partner who's like done all this, especially like who's trailblazed within a community that hasn't had it. Like you don't see me and be like, wow, she's like, oh my gosh, she's doing good things like for the community, for a community.
Mhm.
Um, like that's like kind of like what I feel is kind of difficult. Um, and I get through it. You know what I mean? Like there are days where I'm just like I'm down on myself, but I'm like, no, like you're a strong, independent individual who does wonders within your own community. You're doing the right thing by being there for your community, so don't let like that kind of like attitude get you down. um because like I've said, like I've been able to traverse like spaces and like certain women's spaces without being like shunned or like being thrown out of them. And like I said, I think like that's one of like the hardest things is like dating for me. But I know eventually, things will get better. Um, and I've also learned like, especially when it comes to dating, like they always say, like, you have to like love yourself. before somebody else can love you. So like
Mhm.
learn to like be with yourself, learn to understand that you can be alone with yourself and succeed. You can, you don't always have to be going to places with like somebody or a partner. As much as like I love to like romanticize things as well. I'm a hopeless romantic sometimes. But I see it and I'm like, you know what? It's fine. I can do these things on my own. I can take myself on a date. If I want to go do things, if I want to go watch a movie, I'm going to go watch a movie. If I want to like go eat at this restaurant, I'm going to go do it. But I would just, with like people early in their transition, advice is just like make sure you're also like in the right headspace too, because I know a lot of people within the LGBTQI plus community, deal with a lot of like mental health issues. So make sure you're in that space, you're in that good space before you really start taking this journey. And that's why it's important to, go see a doctor, get evaluated, make sure that, because, I know like with hormones and stuff, being on, things switch around, it's, chemical imbalances happen. So, yeah.
And so on the flip side, what would you say has been the most joyful part of transitioning for you?
Having the ability to have like so many people become chosen family. You
Mm,
know, I'm an only child, so not having siblings growing up, it wasn't lonely, but I had to create my own little world. I mean, I had my cousins and stuff, and when we get together, it was great, but I didn't have that like closeness to them. So actually having like close friends now that are like sisters and brothers to me and siblings, we I feel so blessed to have these individuals in my life, and to have like other elders in the community guide me, through this process. And also to like the joy of learning that, we as queer people, we have history. And, there are people that came before us that laid the groundwork in order for us to like be able to live the life that we are living today. It's amazing to see that. Even though I was an English major, I do love like history. I love looking at history and historical events that happen. And once I learned about like Stonewall and like people like Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, Stormy DeLavery and, Miss Major, all these people that were a part of that, I'm like, wow, like they were there. They
mhm.
experienced that. They're, and then seeing how like history repeats itself, how now we are going through similar, events and having to stand up for our rights now. Those people, like I said, laid that groundwork and they showed us how to do it. So it's like, yeah, now we can take those, kind of like those ancient scrolls, and
Mhm.
be like, hey, now we know what to do. We just have to stay strong. So it's that sense of like community of family coming together and celebrating one another and how diverse we are. And being able also to see outside of like the United States, because I think a lot of people think like the US is the only place. And it's like, no, there's other parts in the world. Being able to see like other queer individuals in other countries being celebrated as well. That's like
Definitely.
the amazing part of like, especially like seeing women within like trans women within like Thailand and especially like India, other parts of Asia, you know, being celebrated or what they're doing as well. It's just like, oh my God, there's so much trans joy. I'm like, yes.
I want all of it. Like,
Yes.
yeah, that's how I feel too.
Breaking news! So, some bad news out of Kansas. Last month in January, the Kansas legislature passed a bill, which is SB 244, requiring transgender people to use the restroom and other public spaces in government buildings, including schools and universities, to match their sex assigned at birth. This law also restricts the ability to change gender markers on driver's license or IDs. It does seem that Kansas is following a few other states that have also implemented these bans for transgender people.
In more positive news, the Fourth Circuit rejected a First Amendment challenge from a Christian substitute teacher. Kimberly Polk argued that respecting trans individuals' pronouns in school
In some positive news, there's a quick win for LGBTQ folks. Democrats are celebrating after an anti-trans provisions were stripped from a major health and human services funding bill. Those riders would have blocked federal support for gender-affirming care for all ages and limited protections for trans students. Lawmakers and advocates say keeping them out is a big relief, especially with the shutdown deadline looming. It's not the end of the fight, but for now, it's a meaningful victory.
If you want to read more into these stories, the links to the articles will be in the description below.
And what do you think has helped you feel confident enough to live as your authentic self?
Knowing that that just this is me. That I've done so much, like I've said, and being able to have my family's support, and especially I think for me was making my dad proud. Because my biggest fear is failure, disappointment. That's the last thing I ever wanted to do. And having my dad talk to him before he passed, and getting being hey, are you really proud of me, what I've done? And he was like, yeah, I've seen what you do, and I'm very proud of who you are and who you've become. Having seeing the joy that he has of having raised me to the individual I am today. That brings me that brings me a lot of joy.
Start making me cry. That's beautiful though. Like I said, it's beautiful to see that the transition that your parents had. Like kind of being a little cautious about it, but then at the end being your number one supporters and your number one
Yeah.
fans essentially.
Yeah. And, even then too, they were, when my dad was still alive, he would tell me that they would encounter some family in Del Rio who had a queer child or a trans child, and they had questions oh, and then I was able to talk to them, to my parents, and be like, well, tell them about, these resources, or where are they,
Mhm.
what do they need, or there's this, just educating them, because now it's oh, I can pass on this knowledge that, they didn't know about. And now it's okay, there's that connection. It's yes, it's happening.
And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how would you say your relationship with society has changed throughout your transition? So from the beginning, middle, and then till now.
Like I said in the beginning, being socialized as male, especially in that, because for me, the way I saw myself at that time, it's okay, I'm a gay male, and, kind of effeminate gay male. And, but the funny thing about that is I was always one of the girls, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I never had friends who were boys, guys. I always hung out with the girls. So I always tell people, I'm my feminine spirit has always been there. And I was widely accepted within girls pre-transition, and sometimes even after it had to find the right group of girls. But it's having that male privilege was, I don't think I ever really experienced the male privilege people think, what people think is male privilege. I just kind of was the individual that was there with people. And I just did what I had to do. It's okay, go to school, get your education. That's what I did. And once I once I started my transition, I didn't get too many people from society that had too much to say, or had reservations about it. It was just more oh, okay, I can't explain it. I don't know why I had the privilege of being able to just kind of slip on through. I don't know what 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 divine, you know, entity or what divine spirituality I have. That's just like people, society just see me and they're like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. You know, like you're okay.
Main
I can't
character
explain it.
energy.
Yeah. I can't explain it. But like I said, I just take that and I use it to help my community.
Mhm.
Um, and I lost, like I said, I lost a couple of friends, you know, along the way who didn't understand why I did this, why I transitioned. You know, I remember having like a best friend when I was attending junior college, and this was still pre-transition when I was still living in Del Rio. And we were supposed to like do the whole like, oh, we'll move to Corpus. Like she had a boyfriend at the time, and you know, all three of us were gonna like live under the same roof type thing, roommates, and you know, and then I moved over here first, and then they moved later on. But by then I was already living as myself. And she kind of like distanced herself from me a little bit, and I didn't know why. And later on when I was like she invited me to like her graduation from A&M, and she pulled me to the side and she was just like, I was like, why did we like, where did it go like wrong? Like what happened? And because I told her, I was like, we were so close, especially when especially when I came out to her like the first time, like I was like, oh, I think I'm, you know, I think I'm gay, whatever. She's like, I accept you. She's like, it's cool. And so I had that closeness with like somebody for the first time as being like a queer individual, you know, of being LGBTQI plus. And she like admitted, she's like, well, it's just, and she told me, she's like, you were so hot as a guy. I just didn't know like what to do after you transitioned. You became a girl. I was like, we're still friends. Like we can still be friends, but like if you were attracted to me, I'm like, but you had a boyfriend. Like I don't get it. Also too, like I'm not attracted to women in that way. Like, you know, because I told her, I was like, I think all women are gorgeous, beautiful, like divine, you know, entities that are put on this planet. But I'm not like attracted you know, to women in that way. I said, but why couldn't we be friends? And for like I think for like some of the friends that I had that were girls, it was like, oh, now you're a girl. Like like there's that. It's and that's where like, especially like as a woman of like the trans experience, that's where I had to learn about like girl code, you know, learning the different dynamics of like women and how women operate, and understanding that sometimes like there's emotions that come in and everybody deals with it. So it's like, okay, like we don't like this person, but we like this person, and you know, the cattiness that comes with it. And I'm just like, oh, this was never, I
The
never saw
complexities
this.
of
Yeah.
girlhood. Yeah.
Yes. It's like,
It's so confusing.
yeah, I never saw this as when I was like pre-transition. I never saw this. I never understood it. And once I got into it, it's like, holy shit, like there's there's so much to learn. But
Mhm.
thankfully, like over the years, like you know, they say like, you know, the garbage takes itself out sometimes. Individuals that didn't
Mhm.
align with me and my transition and my authentic self, hey, if we can't be friends, we can't be friends. But
Right.
I'm thankful that now I do have like other like cis female friends who are like really cool with me being around. And you know, I have best friends now that I'm able to hang out with, and we talk about, you know, girl things. And I keep like questioning, I'm like, is this part of like womanhood? Is this like what girls have to go through? And just learning how, where women stand in society too, you know. Because like I tell people, I'm like, if I had that male privilege, like why would I say, oh, I'm gonna like give it up to be, you know, a woman and be down here? It's like I was always a woman to begin with. I always felt inside I was feminine. So,
Mhm.
you know, I always felt like I didn't have that male privilege. Um, maybe on the outside representing, people saw that male privilege, but I didn't see it, you
Right.
know.
You didn't feel
Um,
that privilege,
mm-mm.
so
No, I didn't. Yeah.
mhm. Would you say that's probably because you were a very feminine gay man?
Think like for some cis women, they feel safe around like a feminine gay individual.
Mm.
So having that kind of like essence, they felt like, oh, okay, like this person's cool to be around and I can be myself. But
Right.
like I said, like, once I transitioned to being, me, it was kind of like, oh, now you're one of us. So I have to have my guard up. And I'm like, no, you don't.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
still the same person. Like, you can still trust me with things. I'm not going to like,
Con you.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And would you say there's like any common misconceptions that go around about trans women that you wish people understood?
Oh, definitely. There's so much. I always tell people, when it comes to trans women, I think not that I think, I know we are like fetishized, and having that kind of like the stereotype behind it and being like pigeonholed into just like, oh, you know, we see it from that perspective because of like the adult entertainment industry. And I have nothing against, the industry, because at the end of the day, to me, it's like, hey, those people, you get into it, you make your money, like make your money. I never get mad at somebody who's trying to chase their bag. I'm like, hey, you do what you got to do. And also to the fact that our community has always like had to rely on that as probably like an alternate form of like income. Like that's just part of our culture. But a lot of misconceptions is that, like with trans women, that we're nothing but like, that a lot of us are like tops, I guess, from seeing certain videos, and that a lot of us are like predators. And that's why we want to go into women's spaces and being, women's bathrooms. And at least the trans women I've met, it's like that's not what we're thinking about. We're thinking about our livelihoods right now. We're trying to survive and we're trying to help one another. Um, but this idea of like of being like predatory, that trans women are predatory, is just it's flabbergasting to me. And I'm not saying that there aren't, I'm sure there are like people out there who try to use, you know, transitioning as like a way to get into spaces, but that's kind of where it's like, if you get to know like an actual like trans person who's gone through the process of like having to do I always tell people, I'm like, there is so much red tape you have to go through.
Right.
Like, like I said, like getting, paperwork for your hormones, getting paperwork for your
Hmm.
documents, having to change stuff on all like your bank accounts. Like, so somebody, like they don't understand all the hard work that we all put in when we transition in order to be ourselves. It's like that's, but
It just dawned on
and
me that I feel like they think it's the process of getting a gun. Like you can get a gun within like 4 hours, whereas like transitioning takes like a year to prove that you're trans. So
Mhm.
it's like they think we can just wake up one day, be like, I'm
Right.
trans. Let me go into the women's restroom to assault people, which is what
Yeah.
they would do with buying a gun overnight. Like,
Uh-huh.
and then what hopes do you have for the future, either for yourself or for the LGBT or trans community?
Right now, I just hope that we we really get through these hard times, because, life is getting real. It's getting scary.
Mhm.
Um, but I want people like to know, I know especially here in Corpus, there are advocates, there are activists out there fighting for you. Um, we do have resources available. If you need any type of like mental health, like you need to do something for your mental health, we have groups out here, to help with that. And I just hope like one day we can actually be ourselves without having to explain, why we're doing this. That that we're just able to get what we need in order to have peace of mind at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And I would hope that eventually things will go back to like pre-regime, because I always say like I
Yeah.
feel so much that this is a time of like it's a regime, and I want it to go back to what it used to how we used to be able to just be like, hey, you need to get a name change, cool. You need to get your gender, cool. You need a passport, here you go. There's not all this more red tape now, that we have to go through, or even just like a complete blockade of like, no, you're not worthy of this. You're
Allowed
not
to.
deserving of this.
Yeah.
And I just want, world peace, as a pageant competitor. It's like, yes, world peace at the end. That's my hope, is that, and that the future of for young trans and queer individuals, that we are able to create that for them, that they feel safe enough to tell, their family and their parents, and be like, but this is who I am. This is who I know who I am. And for the parents to be understanding and be like, okay, what can we do? Because to me, regardless, like, if you bring a child into this world, like, just love them, don't push them away.
Mhm.
I've never understood the idea of a parent completely just pushing their child aside. And I'm like, so why did you bring this individual into this world? What was the
Right.
purpose of you having a child? If you had so much love, if you wanted to give so much love to a tiny human and raise this person into a successful human, to go out into the world and just, spread that same love, why aren't you showing that?
Mhm.
So my hope is that one day we'll get through this, um, and really be able to like understand like humanity, that at the end of the day, we're human. We're all human, at least that I'm that I know of. And we all have human DNA, like I said, at least that I know of. And that we have this one planet that we're existing on right now. Right now we don't have the resources to fly off into space and go to another planet and start a colony out there, or start somewhere else. It's like we're all we have right now, and we need to cultivate that love back. We need to bring that love of loving thy neighbor, and embracing one another just for existing, and being like, I see you, I know you're struggling, but I'm here for you. um and like I said, we have resources here in the coastal bend, and I don't know if a lot of people know, but strengthening and wellness, uh here in the coastal bend, they have support groups, LGBTQIA plus support groups, and trans support groups. Also with Pride Corpus Christi, we have our transgender resource initiative, and with that, you're able to fill out a form, and we provide um just different things that anybody needs during their transition, like makeup, what is it, packers, binders, breast forms, products that will help with your transition as you're going through it. So like I said, there are people out there who care about you and whatever that you're, whatever you're going through. And we also have, people locally within, the legal systems that can help you, at least at this point, like with your name change. It's probably difficult, of course, to get the gender marker, but even if having like your name change brings you peace of mind, we're able to help you with that. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask. One of my friends and I, we always say, closed mouths never get fed.
Mhm.
So you have to have that courage and take that first step yourself to be like, I know who I am. I know what I want. This is what I'm going to do. So please reach out, reach out. And like I said, follow online, Pride Corpus Christi. That's where we have like all our resources listed. That's where like Coastal Bend Trans Alliance is too. Sign up for the newsletters that are released every month. And that way you can also keep up with all events that we're doing, and also to like groups that you can get involved in. And if you can, please, volunteer and help out the LGBTQI plus community with events that are going on, because then you'll meet more like-minded individuals, and get to know them, and create a bigger chosen family.
What more would you want?
Uh-huh.
And do you guys have a website for all of those resources?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
If you, I know for sure, like I said, if you go onto pridecorpuschristi.com, it'll have like there'll be a menu at the top right, and if you click on that, it'll have like events, programs, and then a drop down menu, and you can click on those, and it'll show everything that's going on. But if you want to follow, I know like Coastal Bend Trans Alliance, we're just on Facebook, and it's a private group.
Okay.
But if you go on there and send us a request, please answer the questions, because if you don't answer the questions, we kind of just like, well, we have to research and see who you are. But it's better if you answer the questions. And it's just simple stuff as far as like, what's your name? What are your pronouns? How did you find us? What do you need? Um, and follow CCLGBT online on Facebook. That's where if you have any LGBTQI plus events, or if you yourself want to start an LGBT event, that's where you can reach out to us too, and let us know what you'd like to do. And I know also right now, currently on Pride Corpus Christi on the website, we're starting a list of like of bathrooms within Corpus Christi that are safe.
Mhm.
And if you also too know of a venue or an organization or a restaurant or somewhere that has that's a safe space and has like either gender neutral bathrooms, or if it's just male female, there's a form there that you can fill out and let us know too, because we're keeping up to date where it's safe for LGBTQI plus people to go ahead and use the bathroom. So yeah, like I said, we have a lot of resources available, and don't be afraid to reach out and
Mhm.
ask.
Beautiful. I will also put all of those links in the description too, so they can
Sure.
click it very easily. Um, did you want to plug your personal socials?
Sure. You can find me on Facebook, Kitana Sanchez. Also Instagram, Kitana Sanchez. On TikTok, I'm Belly Bolly Diva. I didn't put just Kitana, but simply because like I said, I love belly dance and love like fusion of belly dancing and Bollywood together. But I'm not too active on TikTok. I need to be more active. I doom scroll a lot on there more than anything. I kind of just watch different videos, but I'm trying to get more active on TikTok when I can. But those are kind of like my socials for now. I mostly post on Facebook, and I know it's because I'm older. I'm an elder now, as they say. I'm getting to be an elder of the community, so which I can accept. I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. With age comes wisdom, so I look at it like that. But usually that's where I'll post most of my what's going on in my life, or like what's happening with the LGBTQI plus community.
So that's a wrap on today's episode of Two Guys Unfiltered. A huge thank you to Katana for sharing her story. If today's episode resonated with you or reminded you of your own story, we would love to hear from you. Click the link in the description below if you're interested in being our next guest.
Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs it. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye.